User experience professionals aim to craft products and services to fit the needs of the people who will interact with what's built. Research is a fundamental part of successfully doing that, as it helps teams understand who already does or will use what they build, what those people need, and how what's built will fit into their lives. Research can also be used to assess how an existing item is serving people and uncover opportunities to provide new value. Research can inform business decisions about what should be built and design decisions along the way to ensure that both business and end user goals are met. Before we talk too much about incorporating research into Agile practices, let's take a step back and look at Agile. Agile is an approach to developing software that became popular in the early 2000s. Traditional software development practices called for an initial period of requirements gathering and design work, then a long development stage wherein requirements could not be adapted to new learnings. A variety of practitioners realized that this wasn't always the most effective way to build software that people really wanted and needed, and they began experimenting with methods to craft teams to work more efficiently and flexibly. The blending of these methods became the overall approach called Agile. Agile is not a specific prescriptive process, but rather a shared set of values and principles that guide teams. The core values described in the Agile Manifesto are individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. There are then 12 detailed principles based on these values, outlining a commitment to satisfying customers and responding to feedback or changing environments, releasing working code on a regular basis, active collaboration across cross-functional teams, and relying on teams to work their own processes and outcomes to be the most effective. In practice, Agile teams use a variety of specific frameworks to guide themselves. The most common framework is called Scrum, and many of the Scrum practices have become synonymous with Agile. Scrum teams are made up of the individual contributors designing and building things, a product owner who's responsible for representing both users and business stakeholders and managing the backlog, and a Scrum Master who helps facilitate successful implementation of Scrum practices and is intended to remove barriers for the team. Scrum calls for teams to gather their work into a backlog, break down work into chunks called stories, regularly estimate the effort to complete those stories and prioritize the most important elements, then plan work into short chunks of time called sprints. Each sprint is the same length, and at the end of each sprint, the team should theoretically be able to ship anything they build. Scrum also defines a regular workflow cadence, including planning meetings at the beginning of every sprint cycle, daily stand-up meetings to check progress, reviews to demonstrate what was done at the end of each sprint, and retrospectives for the team to reflect on the prior sprint and discuss any process changes that need to be made. Each team sets their own definition of done, or standard set of acceptance criteria across stories, and code is only released if the product owner agrees that a story meets those criteria at the end of a sprint. Scrum prescribes meeting cadence and process, but puts a large focus on the team to organize themselves, alter practices to best fit their particular context, and adjust to changing needs or requirements. This means that Scrum teams within different organizations, and even within the same organization, might operate pretty differently. As mentioned, Scrum isn't the only framework within Agile. Other popular frameworks are Kanban, Extreme Programming, commonly known as XP, Feature-Driven Development, and Lean Development, among many others. Each of these frameworks supports the core Agile values, but suggests different specific processes. For instance, rather than prescribing particular roles and work cadence like Scrum, Kanban calls for a continuous flow of work and suggests limiting the number of items in progress, plus allows for releases as soon as an item is done. Some teams combine the time box concept of sprints and the particular team roles from Scrum, and the focus of limiting work in progress from Kanban. There is no one single set of processes that I recommend teams adopt to facilitate research integration, and no framework implementation looks the same from organization to organization. When talking about Agile practices, you may also hear the terms lean, lean development, and lean startup. These terms also often get used interchangeably with Agile, but actually have some distinct elements. In general, the term lean is used to refer to holistic business and management practices that aim to maximize customer value while minimizing waste. The approach is derived from lean manufacturing best practices and promotes organizational efficiency across entire value streams. Lean development is one of the Agile frameworks, like Scrum or Kanban, and is a software-specific process to implement the ideas behind lean. There are 7 core principles and several associated practices that focus on increasing efficiency and value, removing waste, and designing the system and teams in place to maximize those efforts. Meanwhile, the lean startup approach has gained popularity as a broader business and product development strategy. It pulls inspiration from lean manufacturing principles as well, but also emphasizes incorporating cycles of experimentation to inform decisions and decrease the risks associated with moving into new directions. These are not mutually exclusive practices. Often, companies will embrace the ideas of including constant validated learning from the lean startup, approaches to reduce waste from lean, and may use any of the Agile development frameworks to organize their teams and work structure. It's important to note that there is no one standard or correct implementation of these approaches, and there is definite variance between organizations. Regardless of specific practices, each and every Agile environment will have self-organizing, cross-functional teams that focus on adapting to changing needs and frequently delivering valuable working code. As we go through the course, I may reference particular frameworks' best practices, but my suggestions should be relevant to an Agile setting, regardless of specific framework. Because Agile teams value frequent release of working code, there are no distinct stages for discovery, research, and requirements definition, design, development, and testing, like in traditional software development approaches. For those of us in user experience, this means that we no longer have dedicated time up front to thoroughly explore users or perform extensive discovery research, and we'll often be figuring out the specifics of the design just in time for the development to begin. This means we need to adjust our traditional methods to fit into shorter timeframes and work in parallel with the rest of a cross-functional team. That can be scary, but it also means we get the chance to respond to rapidly changing needs of users, teammates, and business stakeholders, and we can constantly uncover and act on opportunities to improve the experience.